once again. This is the Wu-Tang podcast. I'm Singard Superior. The almighty AR is still on hiatus. So for this episode, I have a very special guest. For this episode, I have Chris Pierznik, who is a New Jersey-based writer whose work has appeared in cuepoint, XXL, Business Insider, just to name a few, Hip Hop Golden Age also. And he's also the author of 8 books, including Hip Hop Scholar, a Compendium of Rantings, Ravings, and Ruminations on Rap. Chris, how you doing?
I'm excellent. How are you?
I'm well, man. I'm well. And for this episode, we're going to have some Wu talk on a very, very good and special Wu-Tang album, that being Wu-Tang Forever. And for this episode, we're going to focus on the second disc of Wu-Tang Forever. So this is going to be a three-part series or whatever like that, talking about Wu-Tang Forever. And I decided to go ahead and split the episodes up based on each disc, because to me at least, I think that each part of Wu-Tang Forever kind of operates like its own album in certain ways. So, Chris, I should say that you had this really interesting retrospective about Wu-Tang Forever for the 20th anniversary, and you have this really cool story about your experience with Wu-Tang Forever, going to the mall and buying it and everything like that. So, if you can you share that story about when Wu-Tang Forever came out and how special it was for you during the time?
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up outside Philadelphia, in the suburbs, mostly white kids. And before Wu-Tang, it was, at the time, everything was looked at as either, Public Enemy and pro-black consciousness or, NWA, Dre, Snoop. And the cool thing about Wu-Tang, I think what they tapped into was they got the kids who were just different. They played chess, they, kung fu movies, whatever. So in where I grew up, the Wu was huge. And when Wu-Tang Forever dropped June of 97, it was so enormous that at least half of my class in school, which was 400 kids, so at least 200 kids, I swear, skipped school to go cop the double disc that day. I did not. I went to school because I'm a good kid. And but I went right afterwards, and a friend of mine, he snatched me up in the parking lot and he said, let's go get it right now. And I just remember, like, we don't really have these moments anymore. I don't know if it's because you get older or just because the music has changed and the distribution of it has changed. But it was just, you couldn't wait to get there to buy this thing. Like, it wasn't just sitting in your phone or in your computer. Like, you had to go to the store and get it. And it was an event. It was a big, big deal. And for the next week or two, that's all anybody was talking about, it felt like.
And the thing about Wu-Tang Forever to me is that I think that even more so than the music, just the rollout of the album and just how gaudy the project is, just how long it is, how big it is. I feel like we tend to get wrapped up into all of that, into the actual album itself and how many tracks there are, more so than the music sometimes. Do you think that's correct?
I totally agree. 36 Chambers was kind of a slow burn. A lot of it spread by word of mouth. It was one of those things where somebody said, yo, you got to listen to this. But with Wu-Tang Forever, it was everywhere. There were billboards everywhere, things on buses everywhere. The Triumph video was a big deal at the time. They even had, an enhanced CD. It was a big to do with the beginning days of the internet. And it felt like an event. And it was, first day event. It was almost like the way it feels now when a huge blockbuster movie comes out. And it's like day one, it's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine how much money was pumped into like this entire project between, RZA bringing in, live instrumentation to, where they've recorded and everything like that, and just the rollout, the enhanced CD, which you were able to have like a digital tour of the Wu Mansion, which I don't think I've ever seen. Seen that enhanced CD or what was on it. Do you remember it at all?
Yeah, it's someone put part of it on YouTube. It's kind of trippy because it reminds you of what the early days of the internet looked like. I'm old enough to remember, I was like 14 in 1994. So that's when like, my parents got, the computer with the dial-up connection and stuff. So I can remember like pre-internet and post-internet, and like this enhanced CD, it took you through the Wu Mansion, but it's not what you would think today where you just click around. It took time, and you're on a dial-up connection, or, the enhanced CD takes time to load and everything. So it was interesting, but it was cool because especially for a group at that time that was still so private, and you didn't really know too much about them. These years before Wikipedia where you could just look anything up. So like it kind of did give you a little bit of a vision into their world that you hadn't seen before.
And for you, based on your writing and everything like that, this is your favorite Wu-Tang album overall, right?
Yeah, by far.
Now, why is that?
I'm not saying it's the best, we could debate that, but it's just
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's just the reason for me is that it's just so, and you kind of touched on it, it's so grandiose and it's so big and it's operatic, and the music is polished, and like I appreciate the ruggedness of 36 Chambers and the grittiness, but I just love like the cleanness of the beats on Forever. And I think like Rain Ghost, I think had totally stepped their games up over the previous few years, and they were spitting at a ridiculous level on this album. And it's just like it felt like, and maybe it's also nostalgia because it was kind of the last time of like the peak. The W is still a great album, but this was when they were everywhere, and so maybe I kind of push it with my own memories. But I just, even to this day, I was listening to it today, and it's so good. It's just so damn good. That like it's so different. I wrote about this a little bit, but it's not a traditional album. Like, even though it sounds polished, there's still a lot of songs without a hook. There's still songs where like the members almost interrupt each other. There's this talking in the background. Like, it still kind of feels like that unpolished kind of thing. Whereas like, at the time you had, Bad Boy doing so well with their absolute formula of how to make songs. And this was kind of the opposite of that.
Yeah, that's true. And even it's so interesting. Like, if you ever just sit down and just think about the way Wu Tang albums have been mixed over time, I think that each and every Wu Tang album has been mixed and mastered differently. And even with Wu Tang Forever, I was listening to it also earlier today, and just like how you said, when it comes to some people, kind of cutting in, and it kind of seems like they're almost interrupting each other. I think like on Deadly Melody is a perfect example of that. And at the same time, like, they're like, I can hear like static in the background, some distortion when it comes to the voices, and so the beats are much more polished. They hit much harder. The bass sounds a bit better, and yet and still you still have this kind of like this underlying griminess that RZA has always talked about. In following 36 Chambers, and when he stepped his musical game up and started focusing on music theory and everything like that, trying to figure a way to make it cleaner so you can make the tracks snap and hit harder, but still kind of have that Wu-Tang griminess. But
I was just gonna say, yeah. I mean, I think other people had done it, but on such a grand scale, they were so unique that they didn't care about the rules of this is how you make a song and it needs to be 16 bars hook, 16 bars hook. Like they didn't care, and so in some songs you hear people talking in the background, like as if, like I even said, I wrote this. It feels like a mixture of like a barbecue and like a cipher at the same time, where it's kind of just people like kicking it, but then they're rhyming, but then they're talking, and then like, and that was the other thing about the whole group of the first round of solo albums. At the beginning of Wu Gambino's, they're watching TV and talking. Like, it wasn't just, okay, here's a song and then this is a skit and then here's a song, and it just felt more of like gritty and grimy, but also real. Like, almost like we know this isn't true, but almost like they're making a song and having a conversation at the same time. It just felt less formulaic.
Yeah, I totally agree. And just thinking about the year 1997 and Wu Tang Forever being the the peak of Wu-Tang's popularity, you know, it going 4 times platinum and whatnot. But if you just kind of, you know, place it within the context of the time, it sold, you know, less than a lot of other big albums out there. You know, it was fighting against Will Smith's Big Willie Style from, I think they went 9 times platinum, No Way Out, and Life After Death. Like these gargantuan albums, and you have this Wu-Tang album, which in so many words, it got gobbled up, at least commercially, within, you know, all the things that they were pretty much kind of talking against, like RZA in the very beginning of Disc 2 and everything like that.
Absolutely. He's clearly talking about Puffy in the intro to Disc 2. And then GZA comes in and, you know, makes it even more clear. But, I think, and that's another thing is like 97, it just felt like giant albums were coming all the time. Like you were still kind of reeling from, you know, Tupac's killing, but then Machiavelli felt like it was everywhere. And then Big got killed, and then his album dropped, and, you know, Hypnotize was everywhere. And then, you know, Puffy kind of took over the year, and then Wu-Tang hit, and then Mace hit. And it was just like it felt like one album after another. And it was just, it was crazy to look back on how many copies were sold of all of them. And it's kind of ridiculous that such big gargantuan albums kind of dropped. And like, you know, you talk about Wu-Tang Forever, but like someone like Jay-Z, who now when he releases an album, it's an event. You know, he dropped Volume 1 and people dug it, but they're like, I'm going to go back to Life After Death, or I'm going to go back to No Way Out.
And I think it was in your retrospective piece on Wu-Tang Forever that you said that during that time it seemed like everyone was only listening to Wu-Tang Forever, Machiavelli, and Life After Death.
Yeah, it's just anecdotal, but that's kind of it. And it was one of those things where it's like even people who didn't like hip hop knew those albums and knew songs from those albums because they were just everywhere. Whenever 2 or more kids were together, that's what they were listening to.
That's interesting. So no Art of War?
Not really, no. And again, like that's one of the things where like I like that album, but then people are like, is that on the radio? Is that on TRL? So, you know, like that was, again, but that's also where I grew up. It was kind of a different vibe. You know, no one around me knew who Nas was till It Was Written dropped. So I kind of came up in a different scene.
All right, well, yeah, let's go ahead and try and dig into the second disc of Wu-Tang Forever, which starts off with the intro that we just talked about, RZA talking about the climate initially, pretty much talking about Diddy, as you just said. And then it kicks off with, I would say, the quintessential Wu-Tang song, like one of those songs that they have to play whenever they perform. And I think the song is just synonymous with Wu-Tang at this point. Even, you know, casual listeners, if they know any Wu-Tang song, it will be this song, which is Triumph.
Absolutely. You know, like I said, it was, you know, the first single, and again, it was a song that got radio play and airplay on MTV. Didn't have a hook. You know, had ODB interlude after 3 verses, but it was just, other than that, it was just 9 verses. And you know, first of all, the beat is incredible. It's so lush and so layered. But I don't think any conversation about Triumph can happen without talking about, first and foremost, you know, Inspector Deck's opening verse, which is just, it's absolutely incredible still to this day.
Yeah, it is. It is. I was, you know, listening back earlier, and I'm like, damn, this is a good verse. And people who don't even listen to Wu-Tang, they at least know some of that Inspector Deck verse.
Yeah, I've seen people with the whole entire verse on shirts. You know, that doesn't happen too often. It's pretty remarkable, and it's kind of crazy, especially because at the time, you know, Method Man was such a big star, and, you know, was their big crossover star and all that. And I wonder if he batted second on this because everybody knew that Deck had just destroyed it. So, you know, Meth came in to pick up the pieces, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the verses are dope. Don't get me wrong, but it's just, you know, Deck just grabs a hold of the mic and it's over.
Yeah, you know, and that's the thing about Inspector Deck. If you look through, you know, some of the, like the first wave of Wu-Tang solo albums, I mean, on a lot of songs, he tends to have like the best verse. I'm thinking about one song in particular on Cuban Links that I can't think of the name of right now, but yeah, Guillotine. Yeah, he kills it. I will talk. I'll talk about this sometime later on probably a different episode. But now he's experiencing this so-called renaissance with the Czarface project that he's doing with Esoteric and everything like that, which I think really complements his style and whatnot. When it comes to Triumph too, I always wonder if just the gaudiness of the video also helped it cross over, for lack of a better word.
No, I definitely think it did. Brett Ratner at the time was just becoming the motion picture director that he would become. It was a big deal. I remember they spent $1 million, which was a huge deal back then.
Mm-hmm.
And it also, like, unlike Cream and 36 Chambers, I wonder if this was on purpose, it kind of introduced every member. So I remember 36 Chambers, the first time I heard it, feels like you just have all these voices just coming at you. And it's hard, you could tell who ODB was, you could tell who Method Man was. After a few listens, you knew who Raekwon was. But here, everybody gets their own verse and their own kind of set on the video and a different setting to kind of stand out on their own. And I think that did a huge thing for them. And then with the bees kind of swarming and morphing into each member. Yeah, I think that was huge, especially at this point when music videos were really important to how album sales did.
And also throughout this project, we see some of the Wu elements. You have Fourth Disciple and True Master, who I think in many respects have some of the better beats on this album overall, especially Fourth Disciple.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's kind of weird because the first time you listen, automatically, and especially in the back, it says everything produced by RZA. You go, oh, okay, RZA. And then you look at some of them and you're like, wait a minute. And you realize that some of the better beats, like Fourth Disciple produced Impossible. Now RZA had co-creator on that, but The City, he brought some heat. And then speaking of heat, True Master produced MGM, which is a dope beat, and then Heaters, which is a super dope beat. So it's like it's interesting that even on this album, which was the Clan's kind of culmination, already some RZA's proteges are stepping head to head with him as terms of beats. And props to RZA for putting them on there, because I know that it seems like sometimes he has an ego, but the fact that he gave them shine like that, he didn't have to do that.
Going back to your piece on Wu-Tang Forever, you mentioned one of the reasons why you like it is because of just the sheer complexity of the album overall and in its entirety when it comes to the layered production, and the fact that a lot of the people in the Clan step their game up lyrically, in which is something that I think sometimes I tend to overlook, because I tend to get kind of trapped in just how gaudy the album can be sometimes, that I tend to forget just to sit back and actually listen to like the lyrics sometimes. And although I will say that I always think that Raekwon really like totally stepped this game up. I think that some of his lyricism on this album is better than some of the things that he does on Cuban Links.
It's amazing to see his evolution from 36 Chambers to Cuban Links to Iron Man to Wu-Tang Forever. I mean, it is on this album, he is so complex and he's throwing so many darts at once that it takes time to unravel it. And I think he was at the top of his game on this album.
Mm-hmm. And with and going back to like this, how large this album is, I wonder if it was just a bit easier for RZA. Of course, during the time people were coming out with double CDs, but if it was just easier for him just to have a whole bunch of songs so everyone can get their shine and just put it out that way. Because I was reading an interview and he said that 1995 is the only year in which everyone in the Clan listened to him.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I know in his book, The Tao of Wu, he writes about how at the end of Forever, after it ended and their tour with Rage Against the Machine kind of fell apart, it was over. and they kind of stopped listening to him. But I think you're right in the sense of when you have 9 or 10 members, depending on how you count them. You can have a double album because it's not just Big or Tupac trying to make a whole album by themselves or a whole double album. Like you can have a song with the MGM has 2 people on it. Duck Season has 3 people on it. Now you also have Hell's Wind Staff, which has 12 and stuff like that, Triumph. But so you can have a few songs that have, Deck has a solo track on here. You Got has a solo track at the end. So you can have, you do that and all of a sudden there's, you start padding the stats as it were with, oh, look at this. Now we already have 10 songs and we haven't even really gotten into the meat of things yet. So I think it's also one thing that I really liked was that, different combinations of artists together. And, the people on It's Yours were completely different than the people on another song, Bells of War or whatever. And so it was just kind of like you put together different combinations, almost like you can just, it's almost like playing with chess pieces where you're like, okay, let me put these 2 here and this one here and then pull this one out and put it over here for a different song. And to your point, I think it totally makes it easier because it's not one person trying to make 25, 30, 35 songs. It's 10 people working together trying to make 25 or 30 songs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have a point because whenever a Wu-Tang album comes out and whenever someone does an interview, there tends to be a question about, well, why wasn't so-and-so on the album that much? In which, of course, is complicated because you have 9 people and, you have but only so many slots. You don't want the songs to be that long. And, typically a typical Wu-Tang album, if it's not a double CD, will be between, 13 to 15 tracks. So I can get, so I agree. And then also, like, thinking about people who you don't normally hear on a track together. So I don't really recall hearing Inspector Deck and You God on tracks together, for example, at least not that much in my head.
No, you're absolutely right. That's a great example. I can't even think of one right now. That's a really good example. And yeah, I mean, maybe they, that's the other thing. You don't know what goes on behind the scenes. Maybe they tried it and RZA thought it didn't, they didn't sound right together or whatever. I think now that I think about it, they're both on heaters. I know that.
Yeah.
But I think, but to your point, yeah, it's very rare. I think the other thing is like now when a Wu album drops and if it's not a compilation, like Wu-Tang Legendary Weapons or Chamber Music or whatever, everyone's like, well, why isn't so-and-so on the album that much? And it's like, well, that person has a whole different career. Like Method Man's into acting and all this stuff. Maybe that person was touring. Maybe that person now has a family. It's not the same as like when you're younger and you don't have so many responsibilities pulling you in different directions. You can spend all day with your crew, right? Like, whether it's in school or just hanging out or whatever, like you don't have these other things that are pulling you in 10 different directions. So you can't be at the studio all day and night. So you can hop on 5 or 6 songs.
Yeah, and which, usually RZA, he always has problems getting certain people into the studio, supposedly. So, I mean, I can only imagine. Like, I mean, kudos to people who can try to, make all, try to get all these chess pieces onto a board and everything like that. Because I can only imagine the sheer pain of trying to get 9 people on the same page.
Oh, completely. I mean, it's wrangling, right? I mean, at that point, you're an NBA coach. And the other thing is that, like, RZA was saying, I remember when for 8 Diagrams, he was saying, well, everybody needs to listen to me. But it's like, okay, but maybe they don't like the way, RZA's sound has changed over the years. It's evolved over the years. So maybe they're not as down with the beats as they were in 95. You know what I mean? So, and again, it's just like any family or any friendship, like you're going to have arguments. You're not going to see eye to eye on everything. And especially when, someone is no longer, under your tutelage and they have their own career outside of you, it's going to be tough for them to just be subservient and say, okay, I'll do whatever you say.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if they disagree, if they don't like the way it sounds.
And for Wu-Tang Forever, I think one person that I'm always happy like who got like a lot of shine is Master Killer, because every album after Wu-Tang Forever, and I guess maybe you could say the W, he gets some shine too. He tends to not really had play that big of a role, and I mean a lot of Wu-Tang albums they are driven by Raekwon and Ghostface.
Yeah, and
A
and
lot
I
of
would
them.
say Meth too.
Yeah, and Meth. Yeah, those are the three the three main ones, and then RZA will have like one solo song, and he probably won't have a verse on any of the other songs.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, especially because um, Master Killer's debut album, No Said Date, is dope, and he's criminally slept on. I feel like because he's another one. I mean, maybe not to the level of Deck, but whenever he steps up to the plate, he brings it, and he never disappoints. And that was, again, going back to the Triumph video, like this was the first time you saw him and you said, "Oh, there he is. That's who he is." Like you might have seen him before, and I think he was in the Glaciers of Ice video, but for the most part, Triumph was like this time when you could pinpoint and then go, "Oh, there's Master Killer. Now I know what he looks like," going forward.
What are some of your favorite songs off of the second disc?
All of them, but the last two. No, um, I love Triumph, obviously, and Impossible. I think RZA said that Ghost's verse on Impossible, he called it the best Wu-Tang verse ever. But my favorites would probably be, I love Deadly Melody. The point you made about when they're kind of all hopping in and hopping out, and Jizza has half a line, and that's it. Like he comes in for half a line. He says Massapequa, and then he's out. And like I just the way it sounds, like again, that's another song I just love the beat. Bells of War is another one that is just those two songs especially. They feel like it just feels like a bunch of dudes kind of in a cipher, just going at it and kicking rhymes. And I think Duck Season is one of my favorite all-time Wu-Tang songs, even if it's not the most polished, just because I first of all I love the beat, but I just love the basic arrogance of it. It's just shit talking, and it's just hip hop in that way. And then I think closes, well, to me. I ended after track 13. It closes really strongly with Hellsman Staff, which is basically all of them, and then Heaters is just nasty. I mean, that is just from beginning to end. That song is, and it has a dope ODB verse, which is rare on this album.
Yeah.
So I just I just feel like the project. I like all of them, but like some of those songs are just great. The MGM is. I mean, that is vivid storytelling. Like you can visualize everything they're talking about. And it's quick. It's in and out. You're in and out in 2 minutes, and it's an entire story. It's kind of crazy.
So let's talk a bit about why you ended at Heaters.
Man, I'm gonna get in trouble. I appreciate. I always liked that RZA would give solo songs to people that were next up, right? So Meth had the solo song on 36 Chambers, and Master Killer has a solo song on the W. And I remember, if not for the flood, Deck would have had his solo album before Wu-Tang Forever, but because of that, it got pushed back. So his solo song is on disc 2. It's called The City. And then he gives you God a solo song. That's dope, and I appreciate it. I just don't dig the song Black Shampoo all that much. Maybe it's because I'm white, but not a big fan. And then as far as Second Coming, it's just I'm not an R&B fan. So that Takitha is great. She does great hooks, and she's helped many a Wu song, but it's just not for me. And it always felt like I always felt like those two songs were kind of tacked on, especially because of the kind of momentum that had been building from, you go from MGM to Dog Shit to Duck Season to Hell's Wind Staff to Heaters. Like that's kind of building to a crescendo, and then it's just we just kind of hit a brick wall. And then to me, I wasn't. I know RZA had that solo on the international version, and it's called Sun Shower, I think. But that wasn't on my album, so so for me, like it kind of whimpered out on those last two songs, and then you had Raekwon's like spoken outro, so it was kind of a weird way to me to end it. But look, I'm not gonna. It's still my favorite album, So
yeah. Well, yeah. So for me, let me see. I think out of this the entirety of the second CD, the one song that I like the most is Deadly Medley. I just love how Master Killer just comes off on it, and the fact that I didn't realize it's 9 verses on Deadly Melody. Yeah.
Kind of crazy, and that's one of those songs where Master Killer sounds like he's perfectly made for that beat. Like he just fits perfectly.
Yeah, and I always say, I've always said this, that if Master Killer came out with an album between 95 and 97, it probably would have been one of the best hip hop albums ever. Well, at least to me. Especially hearing like Deadly Melody, Glaciers of Ice, and everything else that he did on certain solo Wu albums that are, they're just amazing. So Deadly Melody. I like Bells of War. I don't know. I think because I always listened to Bells of War when I was like a kid. For some reason, that used to be my favorite song for Wu-Tang Forever. And it just kind of, so whenever I listened to it, I was listening to it the day I kind of had flashbacks of me being like a kid listening to it, like playing PlayStation or whatever I was doing. Triumph, yeah, but the thing about Triumph is that like Triumph, Cream, and Protect Your Neck. After a while, I'm just like, you listen to it so much. Yeah. Just in regular life sometimes, radio, whatever like that.
Yeah, I expect to hear those at weddings. That's how much they're played.
Have you ever heard Triumph at a wedding?
They played Cream at my wedding.
Huh.
Yeah, but I asked them to.
Right? Okay. And
I think Triumph is too long. I think everybody might have left.
That's very true, and it's a sinister sounding song too. The beat is kind of sinister, and yeah.
Yeah, it's not a warm and friendly we're gonna be married forever kind of song.
Yeah. And I think I don't know, maybe in Duck Season. I always go between Duck Season and Deadly Melody as my favorite songs because I love Raekwon's verse and how he comes back in, and I think Duck Season reminds me, or Raekwon's verses on Duck Season reminds me of Ghostface's approach to Scary Hours.
Okay.
Kind of like a blackout moment.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And because I listen to Duck Season, and that's the song that I don't get sick of. And so I kind of sit there and I wonder why. I know part of it is the beat, like how it, even from when it starts, but I know that there's something more to it. So maybe that's why. Because I sit there and I go, why do I love this so much?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because, and it seems to me that Duck Season, it tends to be, at least in my circles, it tends to be a divisive song, and that people, they just think like the beat is just like, there's nothing special about it, and which, I mean, there really isn't anything special about it, but I think it's Alvin Blanco, he made, in his book on Wu-Tang, he made this point about Duck Season, that the beat is nothing to like get excited about, but the beat forces you to listen to the lyrics, which are actually like really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I totally agree with that. It's almost like a half a cappella song because it is such of a minimalist beat. But I think it's so, I guess the word is polished. That song, it sounds futuristic almost, that beat, like the sounds on it. And to me, it's kind of the complete opposite of 36 Chambers, which is impressive because it's the same group. But yeah, I mean, and the lyrics are, all three of them really come off. I mean, I know Raekwon just goes insane on it, but all three of them really, really bring it. I mean, RZA has some really quotable lines too. Um, so yeah, I mean, but again, I just maybe that's why because I'm more of a lyric guy than a beat guy. Um, so maybe that's the reason I love it so much. I don't know.
And I think I pretty much agree with you. I mean, I like Heaters too, but I think I agree with kind of ending it at Heaters. Although I do like Second Coming, but it. So usually what I do is if I tend to like make a if I make a like a playlist, I'll put the Second Coming on like maybe something like on a playlist that has more R&B oriented hip hop songs or something like that.
Yeah, it feels like it's from a different album. That doesn't mean it's a bad song.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like part of the it doesn't feel like cohesive to the rest of the album is how I'll put it.
Yeah, and it's so funny is that it was someone who said that RZA has like you like his use of like strings all throughout this album is very it reminds people of Isaac Hayes a lot, and with Second Coming I can picture Isaac Hayes like in the 70s or whatever like that singing over that track.
That's interesting. That's a really good point. It does sound like an Isaac Hayes black exploitation kind of track.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, that's absolutely true. It's just for me. It's just I found it, and again, I don't know where else you would put it, but I just found it weird placement on the album. Um, and I guess to his point, I guess RZA was like, look, I want to give her some shine. How else can I do it? And I don't know where else it would fit. Maybe at the end of disc one. I don't know, but it just feels like the album takes kind of a very steep left turn.
I would say that this Second Coming would have been better off as the very first song. Like this entire album would have been better off without that long Papa Wu intro.
Oh, dude, yes, that intro, and I got really nervous. I think I wrote about it. I was really nervous sitting in the car listening to that never-ending intro, and I was like, what is this? Like, did my CD scratch? What am I listening to? And I was scared. Scared's the wrong word. I was worried. Um, but yeah, I totally agree. And I think, yeah, I mean, I guess you could have done things differently. RZA's intro to disc two could have been an intro to the album,
Yeah.
especially with what he's saying, because it is kind of especially in hindsight, the album is kind of a pushback against where the music was going, and that's kind of what he talks about. And then to your point, I think maybe it would be a good transition at the beginning of disc two. Yeah,
Yeah.
or the intro. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, because the thing about that intro too is, and I think Alvin Blanco also made this point in that book, is that it kind of the entire album. Well, certain parts of the album it goes against what Papa Wu was saying. You have songs like Dog Shit Maria on here, and it just completely contradicts this 6 7 minute intro and everything. So it's like, well, it just makes it a bit weird. And with that, I'll say that yeah, Black Shampoo. Listening to it again, um, I think I like it a bit better. Maybe I think I appreciate the beat more than anything. I appreciate the beat more because I was never a big fan of that beat. But nonetheless, though, I think it's something that's so I think Dog Shit and Black Shampoo, The Second Coming, are like these random songs that could have been left off overall.
Yeah, I agree. I think the reason Dog Shit is on there because this was a point in time when they were having trouble keeping Old Dirty in the studio, I think.
Yeah.
So to get a full song from him, especially because he had been such a breakout star on the first album, and I knew kids again. I grew up in a different area, but I knew kids who they loved ODB, so they were all about that song. So they were really excited that that song was on there. So he might have sold a few more copies because kids found out that teenagers found out that ODB had a solo track on it.
Yeah, Yeah, I can see that, and yeah, also with me, Sun Shower is not on my my version of Wu-Tang Forever, but it's a cool song. I like it. I'm assuming was that song supposed? No, I'm thinking about Tragedy actually.
That was on the Rhyme and Reason
Yeah,
soundtrack, right?
yeah,
Tragedy.
Yeah, Tragedy.
Yeah,
Tragedy.
I loved RZA as an MC, and because he popped up so infrequently, especially on the solo discs. His verses on Iron Man and Cuban Links, and I was really, really, really excited for a RZA solo album. So we'll leave it at that. No, I like Bobby Digital, but it's not what listening to his earlier verses is not what I would have expected.
I can see that, and I guess like how Wu-Tang Forever holds this special place in your heart. RZA's Digital Bullet holds a special place in my heart. When I buying it and everything like that. So yeah, I completely understand like your attachment to Wu-Tang Forever and whatnot. What's interesting too is that whenever there's like a RZA solo track, it tends to always have like it like in the name of the track, it'll have something that revolves around the sun.
Yeah, right. I mean, well, is that him being arrogant? Is that him? He's the sun. Is that? RZA's an interesting guy. I mean, he's a fascinating person, and he's done amazing things. Obviously, there's a whole podcast dedicated to a movement and a group that he started. But
yeah, what is that podcast?
I think it's called the Wu-Tang Podcast.
Okay.
It's a really good listen. But I think RZA's biggest fan is RZA, and which is a good thing. It's a great thing. But I think he's a big fan of himself, which is good. I mean, he's done a lot, but I could see how sometimes that may chafe certain other members from time to time.
Yeah, I can see that too, and maybe I'm being a bit facetious or whatever like that, because I mean I think there's only like one other like RZA solo song that has the word sun in it, which is Sunlight from 8 Diagrams, but
Yeah, I got you. I mean, but again, getting back to this album, I mean, it is an impressive feat what he did, and you had touched on it. I mean, to be able to get all these people who now were no longer broke and on the corner, to get them all to buy into this giant, grand, huge experiment of an album is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
The fact that I know he laments that it didn't continue, but as I've gotten older and I look back on it, I mean, it is the fact that he kept it together for so long, and that this album even got made and was as cohesive as it is pretty impressive.
Yeah. I most definitely agree. I recall there was an interview or something like that in which RZA, looking back on the album, maybe it was in your article, I'm not entirely sure, in which he said thinking back on the album that, it's kind of slapdash in certain parts and everything like that. But, there's only but so much you can say, to a man who, I mean, from 93 until like 97, he made classic album after classic album. And that's really hard to do. Yeah. Very few people in the history of music can say that they've done something like that.
Totally. And he, two quick points. He said that for 3 or 4 years he was just in the studio, just all he's doing is making beats. If you think about how fast those albums came, the fact that he made all those beats, Liquid Swords, Cuban Links, Iron Man, all to Cal, and he also said, I have a 5-year plan. Give me 5 years. So by the time 97 comes around, they're sitting there going, okay, we gave you 5 years. Like you said, give us 5 years. We did it. Like, let us go now. Like we stuck to our agreement. You need to stick to yours.
Yeah. And, but then, even after that, then it seems like, RZA, of course, he got into movies after like Wu-Tang Forever. And then he focused more on the brand. I was reading this article in like 2000 in which he was kind of talking a bit about Wu-Tang Forever, and then he focused a bit more on like the branding of it and how the Wu-Tang brand and how he didn't want the brand to be put on any like on everything anymore. He wanted it to be a bit more contained and everything like that, and wasn't worried as much about the money. I do think, although I guess he does have certain, I don't know, maybe he doesn't anymore, but maybe during the time thinking about it, although he had certain feelings about Wu-Tang Forever and probably still does, he seems a bit content, especially by saying that he was more focused on just the Wu-Tang brand and what it meant, and trying to just make it grow more and to make it more mystical or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I mean, I think there's an element of it with, as you get older, maturity gives you perspective. And I think it's also, maybe he had regrets because by 2000, it was kind of saturated.
Yeah.
Solo discs were coming so quickly that, for me, a diehard fan, I'd gone from anticipating every album to, whoa, there's another one? Like, wow, like I can't even digest the last one. And, it was looking in a little bit of a bad place until Supreme Clientele came. I think, in their hope to dominate, you overextend yourself sometimes, and maybe they did that, and it happens. It's fine. But I think if you take it in chunks and you look at from 93 to 97, I mean, that run is it is impressive. And especially in hip hop where, people have trouble making a second album, he was able to produce, or at least mostly produce, 7 in 5 years, 6 years. That's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what happens when you're just in the studio and you survive on turkey burgers and blunts, as he says.
That's the Atkins diet, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing is that, like, as a fan and as a consumer, I wanted him to keep doing that forever. I don't care, as long as the music's good. He can do whatever he wants. But at some point he had to stop. He could no longer keep up that pace.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I have to like it as a fan, but as a human, I understand.
Yeah, exactly. And but nonetheless, Wu-Tang continues on, and we just had a new solo album, Master Killer's album. We have a new, technically, Wu-Tang album coming out.
What do you think about that? You think that's a real Wu-Tang album?
Well, I know U-God isn't on it, from what I heard.
I'm leaning towards it's a compilation.
Yeah, that's how it seems, because looking at the tracks, I mean, they have all kinds of different people on it, so it just seems like like a Wu Chronicles or something like that.
Yeah, or what was it, Legendary Weapons?
Oh yeah, Legendary Weapons, yeah, and then the other Wu-Tang things they have.
Yeah, and they had another one. I can't believe I'm blanking.
Chamber music.
Yes, exactly. Music. And those were good, but come on, let's calm down. Like, they're not Wu-Tang albums. Like,
yeah, I mean, yeah, but it'll be interesting to see what Mathematics does with the project and everything like that. I think if anything, a Wu-Tang album should be entirely produced by Fourth Disciple.
I would listen to that.
I would most definitely listen to it too. But before you wrap up, how do you feel about the U-God memoir?
Interested. I haven't learned too much about it, but I'm interested to check it out.
Yeah, I literally found out about it, I think, 2 days ago. So
yeah, me too. That's interesting. Yeah, it kind of leaked out. I felt like it wasn't, at least for me, it didn't kind of arrive with a bang. It kind of just leaked out a little bit. But that'll be really interesting to see, especially someone from his perspective.
Yeah, especially based on that documentary he had some years ago. I can only imagine certain things that he may say in the book. But again, like, this is the amazing thing about Wu-Tang, and another reason why I did this podcast is because there's so many, every year there's something Wu-Tang related happens. It doesn't matter what it could be. If it's RZA and Azalea Banks, if it's Ghostface coming out, being like the spokesperson for a cryptocurrency, if it's a member coming out with a solo album. So right now I'm kind of behind because I just found out about the You God memoir. I haven't fully listened to Master Killer's album. The Mathematics Wu-Tang compilation album's coming out. Got the You God memoir about to come out soon. So much going on.
Yeah, it's like homework.
It is homework. Yeah, I mean that's how I feel sometimes.
And I know You God sued RZA last year, so I wonder if he'll touch on that. I have a quick You God Twitter story if you got 2 seconds.
Oh, I do.
My first book, when I was still renting for Double XL, and I was promoting it, and I was just tweeting at certain members that are in the book, certain individuals. So I have a small little quarter of a chapter on Styles P and on Tretch, and I do a chapter on like underrated artists, and then I have a chapter on, it's actually my least favorite book, but it's the most popular, which these things happen. I have a thing about Wu-Tang and how they're to me they're the best group, and I tweeted You God, this is years ago, and I said I just told him about it, and I said I wrote a book and I mentioned you and the Clan as the greatest group ever, and all he wrote back was, "Give me my check, homie." And I was like, dude, first of all, it's not done. Second of all, I'm not sure how much it's gonna sell, but I'll try to do what I can. But I always find it funny. And then when I hear he's suing RZA, I was like, oh, okay, I don't feel so bad.
Well,
because he said to RZA, give me my check. So
You God is most definitely about his money. And speaking of which, I had to listen to that his newest single, song, whatever, Wu-Dak Yellow, whatever it is. Have you listened to it yet?
I have not, but to be fair, I haven't heard the original yet, so I'm pretty proud of myself that I have not heard that song, even though it's number one in the country. It shows you how old I am. So my only exposure to that song will be You God's freestyle, so I'll take it. But again, like you said, there's so much legwork to do. Like you gotta read up on You God. You gotta listen to the Master Killer album, which I've heard parts of it. I like it. You got the new Wu compilation coming, so there's a lot to do.
Yeah, I mean, you just had that book that came out by Cyrus Bozigmer about the making of the Secret album, which I'm assuming we'll probably hear eventually, since it has a new, or I'm assuming it has a new owner as of now.
Yeah, I want to read that book too. I want to check that out.
Yeah, it's a really good book. I mean, I enjoyed every bit of it. Yeah, he's a good writer, as you are as well.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. So so Chris, thanks so much for coming on. We got to have you back to have some more Wu talk. Maybe talk about a RZA album or something like that, or maybe another Wu-Tang album. With that said, where can people find you?
Sure. Thank you so much, first of all, for having me. It's an absolute pleasure and an honor, and I'll be more than happy to come back whenever. They can find me at my website, ChristopherPierznik.com, Pierznik. Twitter, CPierznik. Or they can just Google, I've written about Wu-Tang. If you Google my triumphant youth or the Wu-Tang paradox, Wu-Tang top 20, I've written pretty extensively about the Wu and how they've changed my life and how much of an impact they've had on me since I was even an early teenager.
Cool. And yeah, I will most definitely ditto. And I think that if anything, you guys should check out Chris, your piece on the best Wu-Tang albums.
The top 20 Wu-Tang albums. You can catch it on I think it's on Medium. I think it's also on Hip Hop Golden Age. Yeah,
it's on Hip Hop Golden Age too. Yeah, and which I agree with about 99% of that list, I think.
I'll take it. Most people, when you write something on the internet, there's always going to be a cadre of people that agree with 0% of anything you write. So I will take that, especially for someone who, is as invested as I am, if not more so. So, and I appreciate all you're doing with this podcast. It's fantastic. When I first heard a podcast, years ago, I was like, man, somebody should make a Wu-Tang podcast, and you did it. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for having me. I'm eternally grateful.
Oh man, no worries. Thanks so much again, and this has been another edition of the Wu-Tang Podcast. Check us out at Wu-Tang Podcast on SoundCloud, Stitcher. Hit me up on Twitter. Hit me up through email at wutangpodcast@gmail.com if you would like to come on, or if you just want to have some Wu chat with me. So with all that said, we are out. Peace.